Hi there, it's Ed. Thank you for tuning in to another one of my videos. Today's a little bit different. I'm going to do a flip through of this fantasy role-playing game called Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, published by Max HP Games. A lot of people have been looking for new fantasy role-playing games in the past little while, so I thought I would let you guys see what's inside of this one. Like I say, this is going to be a flip through and not really a review for a couple of very specific reasons. First of all, I'm friends with the guy who's in charge of Max HP Games. Known him for about 30 years. He's one of my old college gaming friends. One of those folks that you have the in-jokes with. You know, he and about a half a dozen other people will know what I mean if I go, smell that? Monkeys. Nobody else is going to get that. Anyway, so he's one of those guys. So I've known him for many, many years. He became the publisher of Eyes Beyond the Torchlight last year. And he said, hey, would you do a flip through just to let people see what's inside the book? And I said, of course I will do that. So that's why it's not going to be a review. And he did send me a review copy. So again, not really going to be a review. That being said, probably going to give you a couple of my opinions on it anyway. So Eyes Beyond the Torchlight is a fantasy role-playing game, but it is not based, inspired, or a clone of Dungeons & Dragons. If you're looking to break away from the D&D inspired games, this might be one you want to look up or look into. It does take its DNA from a few other very popular role-playing games. You'll see what I mean here in a minute when I actually do the flip-through. This is the paperback copy from Drive-thru RPG. You can find this on Drive-thru, on Amazon, and Lulu. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But yeah, you can find this, and this is the paperback copy. So yeah, really well done. Let's look inside and see what lies within, shall we? So here we have the Eyes Beyond the Torchlight paperback book. The core rules: a fantasy adventure game. Kind of like that. So we have an introduction of what is this game about. We really don't have a what is a role-playing game a book or a section in this book. I think they assume if you're getting this book, you kind of already understand the concept of role-playing games. But it does have a nice little summary of what makes this game different. So it talks about the basic dice mechanic, which is a D20 plus a stat dice. Talk about that a little bit later on. It is player-facing, so the players roll all the dice for attacks, defense, anything else they're going to try to do. There are simple modifiers. There is a standard target number. Anytime you're trying to do something, as I say, whether it is attack, defend, cast a power, do something else, you're going to want to roll a 12 or more. That's why they call it the target 12 system. So yeah, all you have to do is roll a 12 or more. That is consistent through the entire system, through the entire game. There are a couple of ways you can modify that, and I'll talk about that specifically when we talk about the monsters and combat. So we do have stat dice, like Savage Worlds and some other games. Here, instead of having a stat score, you have stat dice. So D4, D6, D8. A lot of the DNA, I said earlier, the Eyes Beyond the Torchlight takes its DNA out from a lot of other role-playing games. Savage Worlds is a huge, huge influence on this game, which I like because I'm a huge fan of Savage Worlds. So that made me a little more likely to like this game anyway. So we have that damage, the threats, boosts and setbacks. Talk more about that. You have hero and villain points, sort of an in-game currency to help yourself out, and also the villains get that as well. We have edges and hindrances, so those are little extra bonuses and hindrances, just like it says. Simplified spell casting, it is roll to cast, and simplified stats. Then we go through the basic rules. And again, basically you're going to roll, and it says right here, you're going to have a stat dice and a D20. You roll a D20 plus a stat dice. If you're trying to fight a monster, each monster will have a threat number. You will subtract that threat number from what you rolled, and if you rolled a 12 or more, you have succeeded. That's pretty much consistent, as I say, through the entire game. We do have 4 stats in Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. We have Brawn. It'll tell you here in this little chart what checks you'd use Brawn for, like death rolls, force, that gives you your hit points, your lift, your open ability, also what kind of offense roll will you make, the melee attacks, and what will you defend against using Brawn. I also have agility, of course, that is physical speed, dexterity, and precision. Right up here they talk about what these things mean. Intellect is mental prowess, education, memory, and reasoning, and then presence. That is your intangibles, insight, willpower, personality, gut feelings, that sort of thing. So, yeah, not terribly exotic. If you've played any other type role-playing game, you'll know what those things are supposed to stand for. and you have a stat die. The stat dice goes anywhere from D4 to D12. Of course, the larger and more sides the die has, the more proficient you are, the more ability you have with that specific stat. There we are. The target number is 12. As I say, that's pretty much the entire rules right there. Target number is 12. I do like this. They talk about what are your average dice rolls. So if you're rolling a 20-sided dice and you have a D4 or a D6 or whatever in the different ability, what is your average roll going to be? So right here, a D20 plus a D8, your average roll is going to be a 15, which is handy to know if you're designing an adventure, if you're looking at monsters, if you're looking at challenges for players. This right here will give you an idea of, is this an appropriate challenge for the characters as they're going through this adventure. We have threat numbers. Threat numbers, like I say, that is something you will subtract from your die roll. So let's say you're fighting a monster and that monster has a threat number of 2. You would roll the 20-sided dice, you would roll your stat die, then you would subtract the monster's threat number from your roll. Again, if you have rolled a 12 or more, you succeed. So I kind of like that. And that is true also when the monsters then attack you. You will make a defensive roll, and again, you will roll, and if you make a 12 or more, you have defended from the creature's attack. There are boosts and setbacks. Boosts will give you an extra D6 when you are rolling for doing something. So if you have appropriate tools, like they say here, if you're trying to open a door and you have a crowbar, or let's say you have extra people helping you make an attack, or if you have certain edges, they will give you a boost. So that'll be an extra D6 when you're trying to accomplish something. Likewise, setbacks are the same thing. If you don't have the proper tools, or if you're in a rush or less than optimum conditions, or some hindrances can give you a setback when you try certain actions. And damage. Now, one of the things I like about damage is, again, you have one roll for both attacks, things you're trying to do, overcoming challenges, but it's also your damage roll. So again, you're going to roll the 20-sided dice and your stat die, and whatever comes up on your stat die, that is how much damage you inflict to a monster. So if you have a D6, you roll a 3, you've just inflicted 3 points of damage. I've played this a few times with my friend. Combat is extremely fast. You don't have the grind you have in some other games where you just have to continue to fight, and combat can drag on just forever. Not so in Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. It is a really, really fast system. Have hero and villain points. Those are things that can, again, an in-game currency. Again, harking back to the Savage Worlds rules, you have, they're kind of like bennies there, but with a hero point, everybody gets 5 at the beginning of the adventure, and with that you can add a D8 to any roll. You can, what else? Take an extra action. You can retreat, get out of there before they overwhelm you. You can also increase some of your powers. If you are a mage or a cleric and you're casting one of your powers, you can use a hero point to boost that. And villains also get villain points. I guess not hero points. It'd be villain points, right? So, Great Escape. If you want your villain to live to fight another day, you can spend one of the villain points and have them escape. Also, a crushing blow against an opponent. They get 5 more points of damage. They get to take an extra action. And they can do a villainous edge, which basically gives any of the players a setback. So you've given them a negative D6 to whatever they're trying to do. So I kind of like the way you use that. You can really influence the flow in the narrative they use in the hero and the villain points. I like that kind of thing. We have time and movement. Specifically, I want to point out this. Ranges are very abstract, as they are in a few other role-playing games. First one that comes to mind for me is Index Card RPG. But we have close, near, far, and very far. So again, very abstract. Don't have to worry about grids or measuring. Should be, and again, it makes combat very, very quick. Then we have light. I kind of like this. It says when you have a torch and you go into a new room, you roll a d6, and if you roll a 1, that torch begins to flicker and will die and extinguish itself in 1d3 rounds. So again, you do have a bit of resource management. Not just you have a torch that lasts so long. There's a bit of a random element. How long is that torch going to last? So you do need to kind of get in there, do what you're going to do, and get out, or make sure you bring a lot of torches. But I kind of like that mechanic, and it works pretty well. Again, in actual play, I've done that. We have rest and healing. Now, depending on your thoughts about rests in role-playing games, you may not like this, but you can take a recovery during combat. You can take a breather. a little bit later. Short rest and a long rest. So it is ways you can heal your character back up. They do that, I think, specifically in this game because you have clerics and they can do some healing, but it's not quite as ubiquitous as you could find in other games. And then we have the combat rules. So we've pretty much gone through all the basics in about, well, less than 20 pages. Go to the basic combat rules. Of course, surprise, initiative, how you move, the sequence, your basic combat roll, your ranged combat roll, your dodge roll. That is how you get out of the way when an opponent tries to attack you. And armor. Armor in this game subtracts from the damage you take. So if you're one of those folks who doesn't like armor and armor class is helping you avoid being hit, this might be for you because it does reduce. It is damage reduction. A lot of people like that. And that's what it has. We do have the optional rule of minimum 1. You're always going to take some damage if you get hit. Alright, have shields. Then we have a much more expanded section about melee combat for offensive fighting, defensive, and ranged combat. How to do those. And then more specific combat examples about like underwater or aerial or, unarmed. What happens when you fall? Opportunity attacks, 2 weapon dice. We also have the escalation dice. So as things continue on, things can get a little more intense if you want to do that. And then we have healing and dying. And we have a lovely, full-page picture here. One of the things I like, the artwork in here is all black and white, but it's really good, and it really gives you a feel and a mood for the game. I don't know if I would call this dark fantasy. That's big right now, dark fantasy. Everything seems to be dark fantasy. It's not necessarily old-school feel either. It is a bit grittier, I think, than epic fantasy. I don't think it's high fantasy. It is a bit of grittiness to it, so yeah. If that's the kind of genre that you like, I think this might appeal to you. Then we go to the GM's Guide pretty quickly. So we talk about making villains, which I really like. Talks about how to create good villains. So we have how to award advancement points. Later on, how to make monsters, which is very handy. How to give them, what's the size be, what size of dice would they use when they try to do things, the attacks and the traits. If you have a bunch of D&D style role-playing games, you want to use those monsters or some of those NPCs in Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. Right here they sort of tell you, here are the classic D&D ability scores or abilities and what's their Eyes Beyond the Torchlight equivalent. And also for old school saving throws. So these are the stats in Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, and then Paralysis and Constriction, Breath Weapon, and Traps. Traps, yes. Death Attack, Charm, stuff like that. So here's the equivalent save from your OSR games. Then we get to character creation. Now I gotta be honest, that's a little weird to me. That's just a layout thing. I always expect character creation to be much earlier in the game. I kind of understand why they did that. They take 30 some odd pages to give you an idea of how the game is played, then you create a character. I get it. It's just kind of weird to me. Anyway, so you do choose your starting stats. As I say, you have a dice for each stat. Have a couple of different methods. There's no random rolling, but you can use a D6 in all 4 of the stats, or you can take a D8 in one stat, D6 in 2 of them, and a D4 in the other. So do you want to be a generalist, kind of good at everything, or do you want to be exceptionally good at one thing, kind of below average in another, and then average in the other 2? That's up to you. Talks about how you can raise your stats, your derived stats, like initiative, move, and run. Again, we have a chart about what the stats are and what they are used for. And then we go to ancestries. And there are only 6 of them, I believe, in this book. That's one of the things I think that will probably come out as a supplement at some point. But each ancestry will give you an edge. And you may take a second edge if you like, but if you do, you will roll on the random hindrance table that each ancestry has. So you automatically, as a dwarf, for example, right here, you automatically get the edge dark vision. But if you want one of the other ones, like magic resistance, or Monty Holler, which I find hilarious, or stone flesh, then you will roll randomly for dwarf hindrance. So we do have dwarves, we have elves, we have gnomes, halflings, half-elves, half-orcs, and humans. Here we go. Then we have archetypes, which are like classes. And again, very much like ancestries, each one of them give you an idea of what armor is allowed, what weapons are allowed, and you automatically get an edge For a cleric, we get divine spellcaster, and then you can have more edges if you like. But if you're going to take these other edges, again, you're going to take a hindrance to balance that out. So yeah, so we do have cleric, divine spellcasters, mage, arcane spellcasters, not the terms they use in the game, that's my term, rogues, and warriors. So you have your basic classes all covered. You can specialize and personalize these by using the edges later on. I'll show you that when we get to that. All right, we do have the hindrance table. Again, this is just a random hindrance table. You roll 5d10 and find the hindrance or come up with a hindrance. Then we have backgrounds. So this is what your character was doing before they became a mighty adventurer, but it's very specific here. You cannot use a background for combat actions. None of these backgrounds are going to help you fight other creatures. So what are they for? They are for when you're doing other things. If you're trying to remember who was king 500 years ago. If you're trying to say, can I track that monster through the forest? Can I survive in the swamp? Do I know the proper etiquette to speak to the Earl? That's when you're going to use your background. Something like that. Which I kind of like that. That's a way without having long skill lists, but you can use it for role-playing in other parts that are not actually combat. And something that actually was sort of used back in, way back in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition. And then has a list, a description of what all those backgrounds are. Really like that artwork for some reason. Well, let's see here. We do have a little bit about gear, find your gear, and then we have the listing of powers, mage powers, and cleric powers. Then we have our derived stats, our hit points, our dodge, armor, initiative, move, and run. And advancement points. What can you do with your advancement points? Raise a stat, gaining a new edge, removing a hindrance, gaining new hit points. The various things you can do. This is not a high hit point game, so if you're one of those folks who doesn't like NPCs or PCs or monsters having hundreds of hit points, not going to find it here in this game. And then we have a creation example, how to create a character, which is always handy. Then we have the description of the edges and the hindrances. Now, one of the things that I find in any game that has edges or feats or traits, call them what you will, any kind of special thing you get that gives you some sort of special ability, they're not created equal. They're just not. Because I'm sure there's some role player out there who would love to have artistic, which lets you boost rolls when appraising or creating art. But I have a feeling that 95% of other players are going to go for the things that let you, like Deadeye. You're an excellent shot. You have a D12. You can raise your ranged attack up to a D12. Or, you know, some of the other options which are going to help you be better at combat and facing foes and a few things like that. So, again, I can't fault anybody for saying that or using that if you want to use it, but I just have a feeling that will not get selected a lot. So you can use the edges to specialize and tailor your character if you want to make a type of class you might find in another role-playing game. For example, if you have a warrior and you could take the lay on hands ability, or you could take the holy aura. Well, now you're getting to the paladin area. Things like that. So even though there are only 4 archetypes, as they call them, you can really personalize them with the edges and the hindrances. Then we have the list of hindrances, and then we have a description of those as well. Hindrances quite often will give you setbacks when you're trying to attempt something. Then we have equipment. And equipment's very straightforward. First of all, we talk about coins. This is what you're going to, kind of coins you're going to have. It talks about the different armor. Again, armor is damage reduction. It is not changing the odds you have to be hit. And we just have basically 4 armored states. Unarmored, light armor, medium armor, and heavy armor. And you can use a shield. Weapons. Most of the type of weapons you'd expect in a fantasy RPG are here, and most of the gear you would expect. And then, of course, we do have the description. Then we get to powers. And again, this is roll to cast. There doesn't seem to be any penalty for doing a critical failure. If you like that, if you're a big fan of Dungeon Crawl Classics or a few other games like that that do penalize you if you fail, there's nothing like that in here. Hold on there, this is Ed the editor, and I realized after the fact what I just said is incorrect. There actually is a penalty and a downside to not making your casting roll, and it's actually in the book. I just overlooked it during my flip through, but it is on page 90 of the powers section. It does say, on a spell casting failure, does not meet or beat 12, the spell is not cast, and the caster must pay hit point cost, losing a number of hit points equal to a roll of a 1d6. So yeah, you can lose hit points, or you will lose hit points if you do not make your casting roll. So as they say in here, there's not a limit for how many times you can cast any of the powers, but there is a hit point limit. You can kill yourself. You can die if you overextend yourself and you don't make your casting roll. Anyway, just wanted to clear that up. So we have information about rolling to cast. We have the list of mage powers and cleric powers. So here we have, the powers, various mage and cleric powers, description of what kind of power it is, what the duration is. Do you have to cast versus a target number in the description of what the power does. Then we have monsters and NPCs. Now, one of the things they do say, if you don't like all the subtracting when you're fighting a monster, you can do this. You can simplify things in an optional way. You can add the threat number to the target number of 12 to get your actual target number. So, right here it says a target number 3 or a threat number 3 monster would require a 15 or 12 plus 3 or better to hit or dodge, whatever you're trying to do. So if you want to do all addition instead of addition, then some subtraction, and then comparison, you can just do that. Which actually, a couple of times we've played, that's the way we've gone with the monsters, just because it seems to me maybe a little quicker. But I do, again, that being said, I do like 12 always being your target number. Anyway, we do have the aboleth here, which is a creature I was surprised to find in here. There's a whole lot less Wizards IP than I think there is, apparently. But all the monsters are very quick stat blocks. There's a few things that are a little lengthy for an aboleth for traits, but we have our threat number, we have the hit points, what kind of actions they can take, their damage, how far they can move, and how big they are. And that's true for all the monsters. And there's about 50 pages worth of monsters in here. And you find all the types of monsters you would expect to find in a fantasy role-playing game, Black Pudding. Of course, you have all your humanoids. You do have all your vermin. You have all of your giant creatures. Ooh, Demi-Lich. Very nice. And again, another one I was surprised to find in here. Dragons, obviously. Elementals, have a variety of Gorgon. Again, Gorgon is a armored bull, not a lady with snakes on her head that turns you to stone. Anyway, just thought I'd point that out. But a wide variety of different kinds of creatures here, and quite a good selection. So I feel like you could use this straight out of the book for quite a while. One of the things that I like about this, it is one of those games that is a one-book game. So you have all of your player information and all your GM information right here. So this is the only thing you need, which is quite often handy. So yeah, quite a wide variety of creatures. Then we get to treasure. Why we do what we do. So we have coins, layers, what you can find, and treasures can be, you have just, you can just as a GM set what they have, or you can roll randomly. And if you do that, you're going to find that gold is only one of the small things you get. Most of this is going to be magical treasures of some sort. And again, some of them are really, really powerful. Some are not quite as powerful. So in that respect, it is truly random. You're going to get some stuff that's super, super effective and powerful, and some stuff that's just kind of more color and flavor. But we have a description of the armors, the weapons, the rings, potions and scrolls, miscellaneous magic, as we might have called them way back in the day. And then we have an example of play. How do you actually play this game? Well, there is an example of play, something I always appreciate. Then we get to the border city of Woldspire and the surrounding lands. So you do come with a slight little setting already baked in. Now, you can use all of the rules without using the setting. They're not that tied that closely. So you could use this with any published setting, just convert it, or any generic setting, you could just convert it to using these rules. But if you don't have that, or if you want to use something unique and slightly original, they do provide a setting here. So here's a map. And then they go into description of the Borderlands. Borderlands. That seems really familiar. Anyway, so it does talk about the timeline of the Borderlands, cities and villages you can find. Has a nice little map here of the town, or the city of Woldspire. The forests, the plains and swamps, what they're like, what you find in there, mountains and hills, lakes and rivers, ruins, roads and travel, the military. Also, what kind of people can you find, and where do they live, and what do they do there? what kind of magic organizations we have, the different gods and goddesses and religions, minor gods and goddesses, and the calendar of this Borderlands region, and a much larger map of the area. We have the different languages that are spoken in this area. We have the currency. And here we have D20 campaign hooks. So looking for a way to start your campaign or perhaps an adventure later on, they got you covered right there. I'm a big fan of random tables, as you probably know if you've seen my Traveler videos. But I digress. Then we have some other maps. Here's Village of Hull, another walled city, the Hopewell Inn. And then we have an adventure. I am always happy when a rulebook has an adventure to give you an idea of what adventures for this game look like, what kind of things can the adventurers do, and give you something to play, quote-unquote, right out of the box. So you don't have to go find something. It's right here. You can do an introductory adventure. So they do talk about the Lost Tomb. We go to the description, have a lovely Dyson Logos map that they've used in here. That's the GM map, and the different wandering monsters, the key for the dungeon as you crawl around within. And I like the way it's kind of laid out. So you do have like a bullet point. What is it? And a very short description of what you're going to find in the room. I like that. Like a lot of people said, I don't like the massive dense text that you find in some of the current actual Wizards of the Coast adventures. You have to really read and mine those things to get out the information that you really need. And this is very quick and succinct, so easy to find. And then we have new monsters. Now, this is going to be a criticism. Why not put these in the rest of the monsters? Why stick them back here by themselves and not with the rest of the monsters earlier in the book? I don't know. You already have skeletons. Just add an armored skeleton. The ones we have in here are that Guardian, and a succubus. Just put those earlier in the book with the rest of the monsters, and refer to them. Where they show up in the adventure. Just bold them or say see page, whatever. So anyway, just an odd place to put those, I think, especially when it's all one book. This is not a separate module that we've purchased. And we do have the player's map, and that is it. If you're looking for a new fantasy role-playing game, you might want to check out Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. I know that my friend is currently working on a few other things using the same mechanics, the target number 12 mechanics. I know there is a zombie apocalypse version he's working on, and a few other things that are still in the works. But yes, no, he is looking to do more things like that. He's also interested in putting out more supplemental material for Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, things like monster books and adventures and things like that. And you can also publish for Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, let me enunciate. So if you are interested in publishing your own material for Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, if you are sort of a new designer or want to get your feet wet, or a established designer and want to design for a new type game, the SRD, got very country. SRD? The SRD is on Drive-thru RPG. I will put a link to that down in the description below, and you can, put out your own stuff using the same basic mechanics. Oh, I did want to say, by the way, that although he did send me a review copy, I did buy one of my own. Just first of all, to support my friend, and I do rather enjoy the game. Played it a few times with him, and it is a lot of fun. This is the Lulu copy, and as I said, if you get it from Lulu, you can get the spiral-bound version, which is quite nice if you wanted to lie flat on the table. As I said earlier, you can find this on Drive-thru RPG in PDF, paperback, and hardback. You can find it on Amazon in hardback and paperback, and you can find it on Lulu in paperback with the cool spiral-bound spine. Coming up soon, we will have another solo traveler adventure. This one's going to be using, as I said, the location crafter from Wordmill Games. So as Anselm and Simon are trying to find the wrecked ship in the ravine, and then also when they explore the ship, I'm going to be using that. And one of the reasons why it's taking me a while to get that video produced is because I'm putting together some models and props and things like that for the exploration phase, so hopefully that'll work out well. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.